This week, we're going to look at the Protestant Reform movement, which took place in Europe in the 16th century, and which was very problematic because you had so many wars among the different religious denominations, particularly Protestants and Catholics. Now, what was the problem? There was a lot of corruption in the Catholic Church. The cardinals were definitely not living in poverty. They were living in a very ostentatious manner. Many of them had children. They were not respectful of the celibacy requirement. And what really brought the problem to the surface was the sale of indulgences. In Rome, they were building the St. Peter's Cathedral, and Rome needed more money to finish the dome of the cathedral. So they came up with this idea that they were going to sell indulgences so that you could shorten your time in purgatory. Remember, Catholics believed you went to purgatory and then you went to heaven, or you could go straight to heaven if you were very saintly, or to hell. So by buying indulgences, you could actually shorten your stay in purgatory. All right, now, this, as we shall see, irritated men like Martin Luther, who was a monk. He was German, and he was very upset when he saw what they were doing, because, of course, the poor people were very sad. They didn't have the money to buy indulgences, so they were sure that they would stay for a long time in purgatory. Now, let me just tell you that before all this sort of hit a critical point, there had been problems in the Catholic Church, mostly regarding the Bible. There were many in the Church in the previous century who thought that the Bible should be made available to everyone. It should be written in the vernacular language, that it should be written in English, that it should be written in German, and that it shouldn't be something that the faithful could not read by themselves, but that you needed the church hierarchy to sort of interpret the Bible for you. So there had been in England several religious leaders, who denounced this idea that you could not read the Bible, that you had to go through a priest in order to understand the Bible. Among them, one of the most important was Wycliffe. He was one battling and finally dying because of his desire to translate the Bible into English. Now, let's go back to Martin Luther and John Calvin. Martin Luther, as I told you, was a monk. He was German, and he got so upset about this issue of the indulgences and all the corruption in the Catholic Church that in the year 1517, he went over to the cathedral in the city of Wittenberg and posted 97 theses on the doors of the cathedral, basically rejecting the sale of indulgences and rejecting many other practices that he thought were corrupt. Martin Luther eventually was called to Rome, and they told him, if you recant, we will not excommunicate you. But if you don't, we will excommunicate. And he didn't recant. He said, no, I stand by what I said. And so he was excommunicated, and that's when the reform starts, because he's going to get many followers, especially among the rulers of those principalities in Germany. Now, John Calvin was also a religious leader who separated from Rome. He was French, and his ideas were a little different from Luther, as we shall see later. But basically, they are all questioning the authority of the Pope and the dogma of the Catholic religion. The other important separation from the Church of Rome was from England, the king. The king wanted to divorce his wife, which was a common practice among the aristocrats, they could write to the Pope and say, I want to annul my marriage, and it would be done. But in this case, the Pope refused to do it because his wife was Catalina Aragon, the daughter, none other than of the daughter of the Catholic king and queen of Spain. So the Pope could hardly do a thing like that. He refused to annul the marriage, and Henry VIII simply said, I'm going to divorce her, and he established the Church of England with the king as the head of the church. Okay, so now we have, during this period, in the first half of the 16th century, we already have like three important churches separating from Rome and establishing their own religion. All right, now what we must focus on in this course on the Protestant Reform is the change in mentality. This is very important. For example, the Catholic Church said that you should not pursue wealth in this life because it was easier actually for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a wealthy man to enter the kingdom of God. Now, this is going to change. Luther, for example, is going to say things like, you know what, you don't need to become a monk. You don't need to become a nun. You don't need to go to church in order to honor God. All you need to do is do your work the best you can in whatever station of life you are. You may be a bricklayer, you may be a carpenter, you may be a writer, whatever. Do your work the best you can, and God will be honored with that. Now, Calvin, on the other hand, had also different ideas. He believed in the theory of predestination, which means that when we're born, God has already predestined us to go to either be saved or be damned in hell. But that nevertheless, you should behave well because perhaps you were destined to be saved and God is going to get angry at you. But the most important thing is that Calvin said it is not bad to pursue wealth. You can really work hard and create wealth. And if you are wealthy here, that means that you're also wealthy up there. God is pleased with you. What is wrong is to live in an ostentatious manner, to spend that wealth living in a life of luxury. That is a sin. What should you do with that wealth? You should invest it and make more wealth. Now, these changes in mentality, which we now refer to as a Protestant work ethic, really were helpful for the economy because people all of a sudden said, I'm going to work hard and make a lot of wealth. And what I need to do is create more wealth. So in the 20th century, we have a sociologist, a German sociologist by the name of Max Weber, who is going to focus on these changes in mentality and say that these changes definitely were helpful for the development, or for the growth, rather, of capitalism. Because in a way, that is what capitalism is. And perhaps it is true that this work ethic spread among Protestant societies. Now, on the other hand, we must not forget that this period was a century of religious wars all over, with the exception of Spain and Italy, because they did not undergo a reform movement. They remained staunch Catholics. But you had religious wars in England, you had religious wars in France, in Germany, all over, between Protestants and Catholics. At the end of all these wars of this century of so much violence, religious tolerance developed, and you begin to see religious as a private affair. You have no right to impose a religion on the people. The rulers have no right to do that. You have to tolerate different religions. And indeed, there are a lot of different religions that begin in this period. Not only the Anglican Church, not only the Lutheran Church, the Calvinists, but the Methodists, the Presbyterians, and others. Now, having said that, we need to focus on the English antecedents. In the 16th century, the ruling dynasty in England were the Tudors. The one we are concerned with is Henry VIII, whom I have said separated the Church of England. By the way, Henry VIII went on to marry, I believe, 5 times and beheaded at least 2 of his wives. When he died, he had a male heir who was the son of his 3rd wife, but he was very sickly and he died very young. So at his death, Mary, the daughter of Catherine, Catalina Aragon, the first wife of Henry VIII, became queen, and she was Catholic because her mother was Catholic and her grandparents, the Catholic king and queen, were Catholic. So she persecuted Protestants in England so much that she earned the name of Bloody Mary, which today is the name of a cocktail that we enjoy many times. Okay, when Mary died, her sister, her half-sister Elizabeth, the daughter of the 2nd wife of Henry VIII and a Protestant, came to rule England because there was nobody else who could have a right who could claim the throne. Now, Elizabeth was a very special person. We call her in history the Virgin Queen because she never married. But it was during the Elizabethan rule that England really became a naval power. The English Renaissance took place during her rule. You have people like Shakespeare writing plays and other authors. And of course, the most important thing, England becomes the queen of the ocean. It is during her reign that Spain sent what was called the Invincible Armada, supposed to invade. They wanted to invade England, invade the island. This was in 1587, and so they built this fleet of, I don't know, 30 or 40 ships that were to go into the English Channel, or the Canal de la Mancha as we know it, and invade England. But it so happened that the ships were too big and they couldn't maneuver well in the channel, which is rather narrow. A storm hit the fleet, and they were defeated even before they arrived in England. Okay, now Elizabeth dies in the year 1600 without having any heirs because she didn't marry, she didn't have any children. And so she says that she wants her cousins from Scotland to come and rule. These are the Stuarts, I'm sorry. But it so happens that the Stuarts are pro-Catholic, they're pro-Rome. One of a member of the family, of the Stuart family, was Mary, Queen of Scots, whom Elizabeth had beheaded, no? But Mary had been married to a French, French prince. Therefore, she was a staunch Catholic. So the English people did not like the Stuarts, did not like these people that come from Scotland to govern them, because they are afraid that as soon as they can, they're going to abolish the Church of England and they're going to go back to Rome, and they think they're autocrats and they don't like them at all. So during this whole century, 17th century, England had a lot of problems. The main problems were the English Civil Wars, which forces of Parliament and forces of the king fought each other for many, many years. They abolished the monarchy. This is a very modern thing to happen in the 17th century. They abolished the monarchy, and England was ruled for about 10 years by Parliament. But of course, that wasn't so nice either, because the leader there in Parliament was Oliver Cromwell, who was a Puritan. That means with a Calvinist influences, and he was very, very repressive, and he was very fanatic. So finally, they decide, after 10 years of ruling England, they decide that they're going to restore the monarchy, and Charles I is going to be crowned is going to come back, because the first Stuart is James I. The one that rules after Elizabeth's death, and then his son Charles I inherits the throne, but they depose him. Parliament deposes him, and in 1649, excuse me, 1649, they bring him back, they restore the monarchy, and shortly after they behead him. They cut his head because he shows that he does not want to rule with parliament. He wants to be an autocrat, and the English are not going to put up with that. So after Charles is beheaded, you have two more Stuart kings, Charles II and James II, but they're not happy with them, so they finally depose James II, and they say, now we want a Protestant prince to come and rule over England. And they invite William of Orange, who is from the Netherlands, who is married to James' daughter, Mary, to come and rule over England, but they tell them, you are going to be a constitutional monarch. You cannot do as you please. You are going to rule with Parliament, share power with Parliament, and rule with the Constitution. This we call in history the Glorious Revolution, because first of all, it's the first modern revolution 100 years before the French revolutions. Here they're instituting a constitutional government, a constitutional monarchy, and secondly, there was no bloodshed. It was a peaceful transition to this William of Orange, this Protestant prince. Now, let me tell you that the English were very proud of their ancient rights. The common people were proud, not only the educated people, the elites, but common people. What are these rights? For example, that you should be considered innocent before proven guilty, that they cannot search your house unless they have a search warrant, trial by jury, that they will be tried by jury. And by this time, you do have religious tolerance already in England. And you have a new religion, which is the Puritans, who are, as I have said, influenced by Calvin, so they tend to be a little bit rigid and a little bit fanatic. But who are the Puritans? They're sort of middle class in England, and they are upset with the Church of England because they say it's becoming just like the Catholic Church. The bishops, the archbishop, they all live in an ostentatious manner. The rites, the religious rites, are very similar to the Catholics and things like that. We want to reform the Church of England. We don't want to stay in the Church of England unless it can be reformed. These are the Puritans.